She was laughing when she called me. Not nervous. Not guilty laughing. The way people laugh when they've already decided the argument is over, and they won. Behind her. My cyclorama wall, the one I'd spent 3 weeks building by hand with a hired contractor, had a crack running straight down its center. And there was white dust in her hair. It's time to evolve. Honestly. She said. She turned the phone so I could see the full room. My equipment cases had been shoved against the far wall. My custom lighting grid had been unbolted from the ceiling and was leaning at an angle against the storage closet door. This space is just sitting here being boring. I'm converting it into an event venue. Clients are already booked. You can use the back room for storage or whatever. She smiled. Be supportive for once. I looked at the screen. My studio manager, Priya, was standing in the corner. Arms crossed. Her face tight. She had called me 20 minutes earlier in a half whisper. Your sister brought 2 guys with tools. She told me you said it was okay. I didn't know what to do. My sister hadn't asked. She had announced. I kept my voice level. Get your guys away from the lighting grid. I told Priya directly. Looking past my sister's face on the screen. Don't let anyone touch the electrical runs. I'm handling it. My sister laughed again. There's nothing to handle. I already talked to our parents. They're backing the renovation. It's done. She pointed the crowbar at the camera. The way people point pens at things they own. Just be the bigger person. Sign over the operational rights. You've been burned out for over a year. Everyone can see it. I'm saving you from yourself. I looked at her for a long moment. I looked at the crack in my cyclorama wall. I looked at Priya, who was watching me with the expression of a competent person waiting to see if the person in charge is going to panic or think. I didn't panic. Sir, I said. And I hung up. To understand why I said sure, why I didn't book a same-day flight back. Why I didn't call the police. Why I didn't scream at her through the phone until something broke, you have to understand what 7 years inside a family like mine does to your instincts. I am the firstborn. In practice. That meant I was the audition that made my family decide they wanted a second child. And my sister was the result they actually wanted. I don't say that with bitterness anymore. I say it the way you state a fact about weather. It was what it was. My sister is genuinely gifted at beginnings. She has real charisma, the kind that fills a room before she has finished a sentence. The kind that makes strangers feel chosen. What she has never had is any tolerance for the part that comes after the beginning. The part where you show up at 4:30 in the morning because a corporate client needs product shots before a board meeting across town. The part where you rework your entire pricing structure because your equipment lease went up, and you'd rather eat the margin than pass it to a client you've held for 4 years. The part where you read municipal zoning codes because your commercial permit classification actually matters when you want to modify your studio layout. And the city of Austin does not care about your mood board. I had learned all of it. She had learned the aesthetic. I'd been in Austin at a 3-day commercial shoot when she made her move. A consumer brand had hired me out for catalog photography. The kind of work that doesn't find you. Unless you've spent years being reliable. When reliability was inconvenient. I left Priya managing the studio. Which I had done without incident well over 100 times. Because Priya treats a creative space the way certain people treat libraries as something that belongs to everyone who earns it. And she takes violations personally. My sister had arrived with 2 contractors and a vision board. Priya had called me within 40 minutes. My studio, formally registered as a Class B commercial photography and media production facility, occupied the ground floor of a converted 1940s textile mill in East Austin. The zoning classification mattered more than most people would think. Commercial photography studios with fabricated cyclorama structures. Custom high-amperage electrical systems for lighting grids. And climate-controlled storage for equipment fall under light industrial creative use, converting that classification to an event venue, one permitting public assembly. Catering operations. And alcohol service requires a full change of use permit. A fire marshal inspection. Revised occupancy load calculations. And a review by the Historic Preservation Office. Because the building sat on the city's heritage register, I knew this. I had read every page of those regulations when I signed the lease. My sister knew none of it. And more importantly, she didn't believe any of it applied to her. She had a vision board. She had our parents' enthusiasm. She had a crowbar. In her mind, That combination had always been sufficient. The math of our family, if I'm being entirely honest, had always operated like this. My sister's ambitions were vivid and urgent and required immediate financial backing. My work was stable, which, in the vocabulary of people who have never built a thing, meant it was optional. Every time she pivoted the Etsy handmade jewelry line, the plant-based meal prep service that dissolved after 11 weeks, and the social media consulting brand she ran for 4 months before deciding the clients were uninspiring, our parents came to me. "Jennifer," my mother would say. Her voice softened with guilt to make it easier to absorb. "Your sister is struggling. We just need to get her through this part. You're so good at making things work, and I always helped. I covered suppliers. I paid back rent. I cleaned messes with checks that were never discussed again. Absorbed into the general accounting of family love, which I had slowly understood, only ran reliably in one direction. Sitting in my hotel room in Austin with my phone still warm from the call, I felt something I hadn't expected, not rage, not grief, but clarity. A very clean, very cold understanding that what they were attempting to take was not a room. It was the thing I had constructed, so I would never again have to ask any of them for anything. And if I flew home that day and physically removed them from my studio, my sister would cry. My parents would arrive within the hour. I would be the older sister who called the police on her own family over a building. That story would calcify immediately, the way these things always do. The cold one. The career-obsessed one. The one who values property over people. I had been that character in their story for 32 years. I was no longer willing to play it for free. I opened my laptop. I thought about what my first business attorney had once described as the redirect. The principle is straightforward when someone is running hard towards something they want. The worst thing you can do is step in front of them. You get crushed. They claim they were stopped, and the story ends with them as the victim of your obstruction. But if you step aside, grab their momentum, and point them precisely where they were already going, they arrive there entirely on their own. The outcome is theirs. The consequences are theirs. You were never in the way at all. My sister was running at my studio with a sledgehammer and a lifetime of entitlement behind her. If I stopped her now, she would perform devastation for our parents, and they would believe every word of it. So I decided not to stop her. I decided to redirect. I drafted a document over 4 hours in that hotel room. I titled it Operational License and Creative Direction Agreement. The language was clean and professional, and to anyone reading quickly, it looked like a gracious handoff, one businesswoman stepping back to let a family member step forward, with a cash incentive to make the transition feel real. The incentive was $12. Ling ling ling. Drawn from the studio's operating account. Designated for renovation and rebranding costs. I placed it in the very first paragraph in a slightly larger font. I needed it to be the first thing she saw. $12,000 was enough to make my sister feel like she had won something meaningful. It was enough to make her stop reading. Then I wrote the actual agreement underneath it. Section 3. Clause 3. 4. The licensee assumes full responsibility for all permit compliance, zoning adherence, and structural modifications conducted during the operational period. Any violations, fines, citation, or remediation costs incurred are the sole liability of the licensee and their designated guarantors. Section 5. Clause 5. 2. The guarantors. I left 2 signature lines, because I knew our parents would co-sign anything that put that $12,000 in my sister's hands, agree to indemnify the property owner and leaseholder for all damages, regulatory penalties, or legal costs arising from the licensee's operational activities, up to the full value of the remaining commercial lease term. The remaining commercial lease term was 4 years at $4. $400 per month. Section 7. Clause 7. 1. The licensee acknowledges that the property is listed on the Austin Heritage Register, and that any structural or use modifications require prior written approval from the Historic Preservation Office. Failure to obtain required approvals constitutes a material breach and eliminates all indemnity protections for the guarantors. I read it 3 times. Then I forwarded it to my attorney with one line: family situation. Is every clause enforceable? She called me back in 18 minutes. She said yes. Every single one. Who's signing? I told her. She went quiet for a moment. Send me a copy when they do. I emailed the document to my sister with the subject line, Studio, transfer your copy. The message in the body was short and deliberately defeated in tone. I said I was exhausted. I said I knew I hadn't been present. I said the studio deserved someone with genuine vision for it, and I was ready to stop holding it back. I said the $12. 000 was in the first paragraph. I did not say please read the rest. I waited. 44 minutes later. My phone buzzed 3 times inside a single minute. My sister's DocuSign confirmation. My mother's. My father's. 3 signatures. Sequential. Like they had been passing a screen around a table. They had signed an 11-page agreement in 44 minutes total. Which meant they had spent roughly 25 minutes celebrating, after the first signature, before sending the device along. They had not read past page 1. I knew this, the way you know certain things about people you've watched for your entire life. I sat with my phone in my hand and felt no triumph at all. Just the specific, hollow sensation of being right about people you love. I had gambled on their greed, and they had confirmed it. And being confirmed felt like losing something I hadn't known, I was still holding on to. I closed the laptop, ordered room service, and slept for the first time in 3 days. The next 2 weeks, I became invisible. I extended my Austin stay on the pretense of a follow-up shoot. In practice, I was watching. My sister had given me location access on her Instagram months earlier. A casual digital overshare from a time when we were still in the version of our relationship where those gestures feel affectionate rather than tactical. I did not revoke it. She documented everything. The first video was a walk-around during golden hour. Her standing in the center of my studio's oak floor, speaking to the camera like a developer, presenting a vision to investors. This space has been underutilized for years. We're stripping it back to its bones and building something Austin has been waiting for. She got 4,000 views overnight. The comments were full of encouragement. The second video was the demolition. My cyclorama wall, the curved floor-to-wall structure I had built with a specialist contractor over 3 weeks. Engineered from a fiber-reinforced compound and anchored into both the concrete floor and the original brick wall behind it, had been constructed that way, specifically because that original brick wall was a primary structural element of an 80-year-old textile mill. The contractor my sister had hired had a general handyman license, a positive attitude, and 0 commercial structural experience. He sledgehammered through the cyclorama anchor in a single afternoon. And as the base separated from the brick, that wall shifted. Just slightly. Less than an inch. Priya photographed it the moment she saw it happen. She emailed the photographs to herself immediately, timestamping the metadata without being asked. She texted me one word: documented. My sister captioned the demolition video, out with the old, sometimes you have to break things to make room for what's meant to be there. She got 12,000 views. A top comment said, main character behavior. Another said, the vision is already giving. I saved every frame. Then I called the City of Austin Development Services Department. I didn't give my name. I reported an ongoing unpermitted structural modification at a Class B light industrial creative use property on the Austin Heritage Register. I gave the address. I described the load-bearing wall. I described the change of use conversion from permitted photography studio to public event venue, occurring with no permit application on file and no permit placard posted. The intake coordinator asked if there was active construction happening without a visible permit. Yes, I said. And I told her the building's upper floor had residential tenants. A pause. We typically dispatch within 5 to 15 business days for standard reports. I understand, I said. But I want to note that there's documented evidence of the structural demolition posted publicly on Instagram. I gave her the account name. The video from 3 days ago shows a load-bearing wall being sledgehammered without shoring in a heritage-registered building with occupied residential units above it. A longer pause. The sound of typing. Can you hold? I held. We're reclassifying this as an emergency structural concern, she said when she came back. An inspector will be dispatched within 48 hours. I thanked her. I hung up. Then I called my attorney and booked a flight home. I parked half a block from my own studio at 7:15 on the evening of the soft launch. She had scheduled it as a ticketed event, 150 guests. A local florist doing installations throughout the space. A catering partner. A DJ. She had promoted it through 2 Austin lifestyle newsletters. Tickets were $45 each. She had named it The Atelier. She had used photographs of my studio's original interior, my lighting grid, my oak floors, my exposed brick as promotional imagery, without attribution, permission, or any acknowledgement that anyone had built those things. I watched it on her live stream. She was radiant in there, working the room in a linen blazer. Her hair perfect. Her voice carrying warmly over the music. She thanked the city for this incredible community. She thanked our parents, who were standing near the entrance, receiving congratulations from people who didn't know the full story of where any of this had come from. She talked about creative vision and underutilized spaces and what Austin deserved. She said, "Sometimes the best opportunities are the ones closest to home." She laughed at her own joke. And the room laughed with her. My mother leaned into my father and he kissed her hair. I watched them and felt something settle completely flat inside me. They were not going to change. They did not have the capacity for it. Or perhaps they had simply never been required to develop it. In another version of my life, I might have walked through that door and absorbed the loss. The old version of me would have written the check. Quietly. To make the discomfort go away, she would have told herself it was love. I checked my watch. 7:51. 2 vehicles turned onto the block simultaneously. A city inspector's white fleet sedan and a fire marshal's truck pulling in close behind. They double parked. The inspector stepped out first, a broad-shouldered man with the bearing of someone professionally exhausted by people who modify load-bearing elements without reading the permit requirements first. He was carrying a clipboard, a tablet, and a bright orange placard. My attorney got out of her own car on the opposite side of the street, crossed toward the entrance, and held the door. Inside, my sister was mid-sentence. The music faded the way sound does when collective attention moves to something else. My sister's expression moved through several phases in quick succession, confusion. Then a performance of easy confidence. Then something she could not perform at all. Which was calm. The fire marshal went directly to the archway where the cyclorama had been removed. He shone a light along the original brick wall. He stepped back. He pointed at the ceiling. Even on the compressed live stream video, I could see it clearly, a diagonal crack, running from the demolished anchor point toward the east corner. And a fine sifting of debris from the ceiling joint. When the DJ cut the bass and the vibration in the room changed, the inspector pressed the orange placard flat against the front glass window. This building has had its primary structural anchor modified without permit in a heritage-registered structure, he said to the room, his voice carrying, without effort. The upper floor has occupied residential units. I'm ordering immediate evacuation. Everyone moved toward the exits. My sister stepped forward. This is my event. You don't have the authority to, ma'am. He handed her the citation form without looking up from his tablet. Change of use without permit approval. Unpermitted structural modification. Heritage register violation. Unauthorized public assembly with ticketed admission. He looked at her then. Do you understand what I've handed you? She looked at the paper. And then she did the thing she had done every single time. For as long as I could remember, the reflex so old it must have formed somewhere very early. In some moment, I hadn't been present, for she pointed at someone else. This isn't my building, she said. Her voice was rising. The lease belongs to my sister. She owns this property. She authorized this renovation. Whatever is wrong here is her negligence. Not mine. Our parents moved toward the inspector together. Our father began explaining that I had effectively abandoned the space. That my sister was simply trying to revitalize it. That any confusion about permits was entirely the fault of my own inattention. Our mother asked to speak to someone in charge. The live stream camera kept rolling. The person holding it had apparently not yet processed that this footage was going to be useful to the opposing side. My attorney stepped forward from near the entrance. She was not physically imposing, and she did not raise her voice. But she had the particular quality of a person who has never once lost a room they wanted to hold. She raised one hand. The inspector looked at her. I represent the leaseholder of record, she said. She opened her folio, and laid the agreement flat on the nearest surface. The 3 individuals currently claiming they had no operational authority each signed this document 12 days ago. Section 3. Clause 3. C. She tapped the page. Full regulatory compliance liability assigned to the licensee. She turned to our parents. Section 5. Clause 5. R. Personnel guarantors. That's both of your signatures. Directly beneath your daughters. Our mother said. We didn't read. The document was available to you for 44 minutes before the first signature was submitted. My attorney said. And her voice was not unkind. Just accurate. There is no legal exception for not reading a contract you executed voluntarily. She turned her tablet to face the room and played the video. My sister on screen. Laughing. Sledgehammer in both hands. Her voice clear through the speaker. I decided this wall had to go. It was my vision. The fire marshal watched it through to the end. He wrote something on his form. Documented willful demolition of a load-bearing structural element in a heritage-registered building, without permit. He said as he wrote. Class A code violation. Civil penalty originates at $250. 000, with mandatory emergency shoring before the building, can be reoccupied. He looked at my sister. If you cannot post bond, the city will remediate and bill you. My sister said, I don't have that kind of money. He nodded without surprise and continued writing. Our parents were speaking at the same time. And the fire marshal asked them to step toward the exit. And the guests were already moving. Some still holding their glasses. Some of them filming on their own phones because people always film the moment a thing comes apart. My attorney walked to the neon sign my sister had rented, the one that spelled out the atelier, in soft pink cursive against my original exposed brick, and pulled the power cable from the wall. The sign went dark. 30 days. My sister's insurance carrier reviewed her account, pulled her Instagram archive, and issued a denial in full. Intentional unpermitted demolition. Documented by the policyholder in a public video she had posted voluntarily. When you film yourself swinging a sledgehammer and caption it, my vision, you have written the insurance company's decision for them. They were grateful for the efficiency. That left the city fines, the emergency structural remediation, and the accelerated indemnification under Clause 5. R. 248美元. 0 inches regulatory penalties. 71美元. 0 inches shoring and structural repair. And the remaining lease obligations calculated against documented damage to a heritage property. My sister's checking account. At the time the citations were issued, held less than $1,000. Clause 5. 2 executed exactly as written. Our parents' primary residence, the house they had owned for 24 years, entered foreclosure proceedings within 30 days. They moved into a rental at the edge of the city. My mother called me once and left a long voicemail that addressed everything except the part where I had spent nearly a decade telling her, in words that were always received as ingratitude, that funding consequences was not the same as helping someone grow. I listened to the full message. I did not call back. My sister filed for personal bankruptcy. The Atelier brand never launched. The lifestyle newsletters that had promoted the soft launch ran brief follow-up items. And then the story dissolved. As most things do. She sent 2 texts. The first said this was entirely my fault. The second asked if I had any money I could spare. I read both of them and did not reply. Priya heard the news on the same morning. I signed the lease on a new space, a commercial studio unit in a newer building on the east side. Industrial-grade construction. Excellent natural light through the north-facing windows. No heritage designation. No complication. Clean and straightforward. Exactly the way I now preferred things. She also received a 40% raise, an operational director title, and a small equity stake in the business. Because she had stood inside my studio on the day my sister arrived with contractors, taken photographs on her personal phone without being asked, emailed them to herself to timestamp the metadata, and said nothing to anyone until I needed her to say something. That kind of person is not an employee. That kind of person is a partner. We moved into the new studio on a Wednesday. The floors were polished concrete, and the HVAC ran loud, and the lighting grid took 4 hours to assemble properly. But when it was done and the test lights came up, Priya stood in the center of the room and looked up at the ceiling and said, "Yeah. This works." I thought about the old studio, the particular smell of it in the early mornings. The acoustic warmth of the cyclorama. The quality of winter light through the east-facing windows in January, when I'd done some of the best work of my career. I thought about my grandmother's advice. The one she gave me years ago when I told her I wanted to build something. Build something they can't take from you. I had understood that to mean the building. The lease. The business entity. I understood now she'd meant the skill. They cannot take the skill. They never could have touched it. I typed 2 lines into the family group chat, where I had not spoken in 30 days and had not been missed, which was its own kind of information. You wanted the studio. You own what came with it. I left the group, set my phone face down on the equipment case, and went back to building something mine. People ask me when they hear this story secondhand and come back with questions why I didn't call the police the afternoon Priya first called me. Why I let them keep going for 2 full weeks. Why I waited. Here's the honest answer. If I had called the police that afternoon, my sister would have received a civil dispute notice. My parents would have arrived within the hour. And by evening, the story would have been about the older sister, who couldn't let her family be happy. I would have won the day and lost the framing entirely. And in families like mine, the framing is what lasts. I would have spent the next several years explaining myself at every gathering. I didn't want to win an argument. I wanted the consequences to be real. And I needed them to come from choices they made freely. Without my hand visible anywhere in the outcome, the difference between a fight and a redirect comes down to one thing: patience. You don't prevent someone from making a mistake. You ensure the mistake belongs completely to them when it finally lands. They signed the contract. They swung the sledgehammer. They posted the video. They sold tickets to an event inside a building that was already separating at its joints. I just made sure that none of the exits led anywhere comfortable. Have you ever had to watch someone dismantle something you built and choose? Deliberately. Not to stop them. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from.